Welcome back. Diane Masson is back with us today and has her books, Your Senior Housing Options. Also, there is the website, tipstoseniors.com. Nice to have you back.
Glad to be here.
Today we're going to talk about, how I think seniors are, today compared to 50 years ago, have a more vibrant lifestyle. And more importantly, they're looked upon differently than what they were 50 years ago. And along with that is that proof in a community like this, or even outside this community, they want a very, most of them, active place to live and be able to go out and do the things they want to do, whatever it might be, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're all at that point where it's like, when is the right time to make a move? Mm-hmm. And I think simple answer is that everybody's at a point where they can choose for themselves, or if they wait for a crisis, then ultimately their family or their adult children put them someplace. Mm-hmm. And that's never a good situation when somebody puts you someplace. I don't think any senior ever wants that. So on when is the time to make an ideal time to make a move, I think a couple of the triggers that I've seen over my 18-year career working with seniors is if their health starts deteriorating or they just get a new health diagnosis from the doctor and their doctor says, gosh, you have degenerative something or other, or, a serious heart condition, maybe they have MS, Parkinson's, they just got diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. Hey, it's time to start making a move and to look for a more supportive environment as somebody ages. But there's other things that are a little tougher to define, and that is that, you're sitting in your home and you're like, gosh, I'm having a hard time remembering stuff. Mm-hmm. And that might be a good time to start looking, because if you're having a hard time remembering stuff now, it's gonna get worse and worse, and then it's gonna be harder for you to make a decision on where to move. Mm-hmm. And so it's important for people to really plan ahead. But I think one that you've probably run into and I've heard of is all of a sudden a senior's getting a couple of fender benders and the curb jumped up in front of me, and this car just went in front of me and it wasn't my fault. But when a senior starts getting into a couple of accidents and you see several accidents within a short period of time, it's time to make a move. But I think overall is when the basics become too hard to do anymore. Like going out and getting groceries, bringing them home, making a nutritious meal for yourself, taking care of your home, keeping it clean, being able to get out to the doctor. And so that's kind of when it's time to make a move, when you're struggling.
What about the situation? My dad is a very good example of this. Lives out in Santa Fe. He'll be 86 this year. His wife just passed away. But I think he would, my brother who has talked to him about this, my brother is as a physician's assistant out in Santa Fe as well. So he actually moved in with my dad while his place is being rented out. My dad, the last thing he would ever do in his life would be to move out of his home into any kind of facility, because we've kind of talked to him about that. I know there's a woman in our neighborhood who's very vibrant. She's probably 84, goes out and walks her dog every day. I mean, there's, a very, very vibrant person. She has said the same thing to me. There are people that do want the alternative, and maybe financially they can do this, to rather have somebody come into their home or other alternatives. And you've probably known people like this too. It's like, this is my home. If I move out, I might as well just fade away.
I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come to one of my presentations and say to me, Diane, you're going to have to take me out of my house feet first. Mm-hmm. They don't want to move out. And so one time you and I had spoken about, in chapter 3 in my book, is what are the facts on home care? Mm-hmm. And if you have a 66% chance of needing assisted living or skilled nursing at some point in your life, and 20% of us are going to need it for more than 5 years, that means that if you want to stay home, you got to bring the care into your home.
Right.
And a lot of people don't realize how expensive that is. So in your case, you have a family member that stepped in. If you're hiring somebody from the outside, here you are at a vulnerable place in your life when you don't feel good. You have somebody coming in to take care of you. And if you don't know who they are, if they're not a family member, they can literally take over your life. So, and then plus it's very expensive when you have somebody taking care of you 24/7. But, ultimately every senior is one fall away from a crisis.
Right.
And, when you hit the age of 80, 85 years old, a fall, you kind of always say, what happened to so-and-so? What happened to so-and-so? And then you go, they fell. And then it was just progressively downhill from there. So don't fall.
Right. And I know what you mean. Even with my dad, and when my stepmom was alive, my brother tried to get them to just have a housekeeper come in. We have a housekeeper that comes in every 2 weeks. It's wonderful. And they don't touch that, don't move that, don't clean that. And finally he convinced them. Of course, when he moved in after his mom passed away, I think this was, she passed away in January. He's still cleaning that house. He is, But it's a hard situation, as you know. When people feel like I'm being taken out of my home, even if there are wonderful places out there. It's that convincing. Yeah, it's a hard thing. It really is.
It is a hard thing, and ultimately, not everybody, makes a decision. And they, like my in-laws, they wanted to stay in their own home. He says, I'm the most stubborn German in the world, and I don't want to leave my home, and I want to be a caregiver for my wife. But he understood he was waiting for a crisis. And then ultimately, when the crisis happened, who had to pick up the pieces? The family did.
Yes.
And we were in a complete nightmare situation where I had my father-in-law in one hospital, my mother-in-law was in another hospital at the same time. And ultimately, after 65 years of marriage, they never got to live together again.
Wow.
And it was awful. And I would not wish that on anybody ever.
And that's one thing that a lot of these facilities are basically, in many cases, like an apartment, for lack of a better term, but they can live together. There may be, am I right? They can, if they decide, let's move in together, they can be together, and the care can be ongoing. I don't know if there may come a point in time when one person who needs more help than the other might have to move downstairs to another room, but essentially they're still with each other.
Well, what you're kind of referring to, Ken, is that they can move in together into independent living.
Right.
And then sometimes there's situations where one might be in assisted living and the other one might be in independent living. Yeah. But nobody ever goes and moves in with their spouse into skilled nursing or into memory care. It just doesn't happen.
Yes.
And so, but there are places such as Freedom Village up the street, which is a continuing care retirement community, which has 3 levels of care on the same campus: independent living, assisted living, and skilled nursing.
Yeah, that's what,
And so that makes it nice. But if you're in a rental facility and one of you needs more care, they literally make you move out. They literally kick you out because they can only legally provide the care that's licensed within that community. And so people, when you're out there exploring senior housing options, you don't want to just think about what do you need today, but what are you going to need for your future care, and do you have enough financial resources to pay for it, and does the place that you're choosing to move to have all the levels of care that you need to live in as you transition, or who's going to help you make those transitions? Right,
exactly. And again, as you said, the level of care that you can afford, it's going to be different for everyone, and that, depending who they are, is going to play into whatever decision they may make. That's just, unfortunately, it's the way that it is.
That's true.
Yeah, and so, by the way, your book is available, all the usual Amazon and all that, and Kindle edition.
It is.
Which is nice, because I'm a digital book guy. And the website is tipstoseniors.com, right? And you have some tips on there, and then if somebody wants to get the book through there as well, right?
They can.
Yeah, and you really go in this book, you go through, like what we just talked about, all different options and things like that, the pros and cons. And
I do. And if you get the book in 4 hours, you'll have everything that you need to know.
Exactly.
And it's planning ahead versus waiting for a crisis.
All right. It's always good to see you.
Great to see you
You
as
take
well.
care, and we will be right back.